but HTML5 can't make use of, the hardware capability. So, in order for HTML5 to keep progressing at the same rate as the power of the consumer devices, there's got to be some things that no doubt get addressed there if it's going to equate to or even displace over time some of the apps model.
Una, your view on this?
Yeah, I think, I was just going to say the same thing. It must be something about students from UCC thinking alike. But at Disney, we see the same thing. It's really consumer behavior that drives, first of all, what businesses need to do to change, and then, therefore, that drives the technology roadmap. What's happening, obviously, is that there are developers that are, out there that are, not part of Disney today, but could be part of, without, don't want to get myself into too much trouble here, but, could get, be part of an acquisition that would eventually become a product that, would fit very well with one of either, some content delivery mechanism at Disney. So it's really the consumers that are driving the changes. I mean, the technology roadmaps that we're building right now are exactly that. I think the biggest challenges that we have as technologists is just dealing with all these different standards. I mean, Sean was talking about HTML5, so there's huge opportunity with HTML5, but when you're working for a content company, you still have a lot of people who are working in Flash. We have to handle that transition. We're developing games, we're developing movies, we're developing a lot of content which is being consumed, and it needs to be easily accessed on these smartphone devices or tablet devices. So, waiting to see, what that battle's going to be between Android and then iOS as well, that really drives a lot of the roadmap. On the corporate side, then once again, it's just that taking that consumerization and using that to change, really technologies that feel very antiquated. Email feels antiquated now. And things that we talked about before, traditional data warehousing. When you sit down with somebody in a business unit and you tell them that it's going to take us 4 months to do transformation on their data so that they can see a report, and they won't see that for 4 months. I mean, it's just unacceptable. So anyway, those are the types that...
Barry, you'd like
to
comment on that?
I agree with my esteemed UCC colleagues here. The only thing I'd add, the consumers definitely are going to drive it, but I think what's also important is what the consumers have given to the cloud providers in terms of their personal data and the social graph and the power of that. The metadata now that the cloud providers have is incredibly powerful, and the platforms they can build on top of that. The other big thing is OpenStack, which I think as a standard is going to change the industry and move us away from the kind of islands of clouds we have at the moment. I saw that one of your entertainment peers last week, who's big in similar industries, announced, or they didn't announce, it came out that they moved a lot of their workload from Amazon Web Services to Rackspace, which is an OpenStack provider, and that's big in the industry. And I think that's one of the big technology drivers is that standard.
Yeah.
Thanks, Barry. I hope UCC are paying strongly to ITLG for all this branding. There's a related question in terms of the technology roadmap, and that is about the, everyone refers to the massive and increasing demand for bandwidth. And really, who's going to provide the infrastructure solutions? And I know, Chris, you wanted to comment on this issue.
Yeah, for the record, I did not come up with this question, but it is definitely a slow fastball across the middle of the plate. So let me just rattle off some stats to keep your attention out there. AT&T, on an average business day, moves over 20 petabytes of data across the network. We have laid over 880,000 fiber route miles worldwide, and we are in the midst of transitioning the United States to 4G in all of our markets. So, for those of you that are unaware of the true speed and capabilities that 4G offers, the theoretical speed of 4G is amazing. It's about 326 megabytes per second, which is really fast, similar to what you would experience in the fastest Wi-Fi connection that you would have. Again, that's theoretical rate, so you won't experience that all the time on all devices, but we've announced rollout of this capability, and we've announced 24 new devices that it's going to be available on. I guess our CEO of our mobile division summed it up best when he was quoting Gizmodo recently at the Consumer Electronics Show. The results are in. AT&T LTE is fast as blazing hell. So we understand the challenge is there. We're ready to meet it, and we're in massive build-out and investment mode today. The only other thing I would add that's specifically important for Irish companies that are coming over to do business in North America is we, of course, are part of the GSM standard, and we adhere rigidly to that. So there's a natural advantage to being able to bring your applications and services and capabilities over and partnering with AT&T as far as a technology delivery solution.
Thanks, Chris. I suppose the elephant in the room really about cloud technology is security, and really we have to address that subject. And I suppose the question is, what happens if there is a major security breach of a significant nature? So we're going to have some discussion around the security issues. I'm going to start with Neil on this issue, please.
Thanks. I'll put it in context, I guess, because I guess I'm with the big guys here, and the International Digital Services Centre is more aimed at small to medium-sized enterprises looking to set up global operations. So in a European context, that's becoming, in a sense, a big opportunity, but more difficult. The fiscal crisis in Europe is actually bringing about a rapid federalization of Europe, which is bringing the digital single market of Europe at a much faster pace. But also now that they are putting on a legislative footing is internet security, data protection, data privacy laws as well. And for the large players who can just throw lawyers at that, that's great. But for the smaller guys who through this cloud computing opportunity are looking to rapidly scale, as John O'Farrell mentioned, Europe can be quite fortress-like and difficult to deal with. So what we're hoping is that we, in Ireland, we'll be able to give them hold their hand in a turnkey solution to deal with what's becoming very stringent on a European basis. I think Google have just crossed the line, perhaps, with the privacy, the joining of their privacy policies across all their decks. And I think it's going to be very interesting in the next 6 months to see how the European Commission faces them down.
Una, I know you wanted to contribute to this section.
Well, you know, I think, you know, normally I would say, you know, I'd pass you the email of the SVP of Security at Disney, and then I'd keep my mouth shut. But I think, you know, as it relates to me and my role, what I do at Disney, consumer privacy is a big aspect of what we do. You know, funny, I was just you know, in reference to something Chris said earlier about consumer identity, is a huge, first of all, it's a huge, seems to be both a driver for discussion, a driver for how we engage with consumers, and then it's an infrastructure, ties to legal aspects, business aspects. It's very tied to everything that we do when users come to consume our content. And then, of course, we want to be able to provide them the ability to interact with anything they want. So say, for example, in gaming, you know, you're playing Xbox or you're playing Wii, you know, you want to be able to link those identities together. So we're not just handling, protecting security for, you know, our own, inside our own walls, but outside of our walls as well. And it's really this identity ecosystem. So, you know, one aspect for me is identity, and then another aspect is privacy. On the privacy piece, you know, we obviously are constantly trying to stay on top of everything we need to do to comply with European Commission, you know, European laws, all international laws with regard to data protection, and that can be quite a challenge. You know, so thankfully the ones who are really out on the front burners are Google and Facebook, and we're all learning from them. Sure. But at the same time, you know, a company like Disney really has to be out in front too, just because of the brand protection. You know, particularly we have children who are coming to the site, and we've got our sites, and you know, we need to protect consumers' data. So it's a huge topic for us at the moment.
Thanks, Una. Just before we move to the Q&A session, to the floor, there's two last questions I'd like to pass on briefly to the panel itself. The first is around consumerization and the impact, really, that the notion that the consumer is driving computing today. We look at consumer models like Box.net, Yammer, and so on being ported into the enterprise. I would get a sense from the panel, and maybe I'll start with Sean on this here, about the impact of the consumer and why the corporate IT experience really isn't as easy as the consumer one.
Yeah, you know, I think CIOs in general in the corporate setting tend to get bashed for, you know, being left behind, not you know, being as current as all the consumers want them to be. But, you know, I think for the most part, CIOs are very aware of what consumers want and how they want to consume. But of course, they've got a lot of legacy stuff they still have to deal with. You know, they still all have these legacy systems, ERP systems. They can't just, you know, okay, we're done with that, you know, turn it off overnight. So there is a whole transition that, you know, people that run technology organizations within corporations need to move the organization through. And it's as they identify new opportunities for software as a service type solutions, you know, they clearly are looking at those. It's really a case of how do you bring all these things into a corporate setting to coexist. And I would say that, you know, following on from the privacy side to moving more onto the protection side of the conversation, you know, I think the dialogue is more about, you know, you look at a SaaS service, and it's easy to kind of say, let's take Box.net just as an example. You know, I can give their solution to my information security director, and they will tick every box. You know, they've got all the processes, the policies, the procedures, you know, good to go. What the corporation really needs to be thinking about, though, are the patterns of use that we allow on those applications. So the fact that Box.net allows my employees to, you know, go to a desktop out in the hall here or in the Apple Store or on any device, you know, open up, you know, content that is of value to our organization and maybe download it. That's a pattern of use I've got to think about. You know, it's great for a consumer. Yeah, I want to get everything anywhere whenever I want, but a corporate setting does have, you know, we're custodians of IP. And so we have to keep that in consideration. And so, you know, the things we can do are make sure that, you know, we have sort of delegated authentication coming from some of these services that, you know, facilitate us protecting the use. But, you know, there's a lot to consider. It's not as straightforward as, you know, just let's just start adopting, you know, consumer technologies that are the flavor of the month.
Thanks very much, John. The final question is around the issue of big data. And really, given the complexity, volume, variety of this, it's really some comment, Una, that you might make on the need for data management strategies and the alignment of those strategies with the strategic objectives of the business themselves.
Yeah. Well, I think, you know, I think a data management strategy has to, you know, it's sort of to the point I was making earlier. The flexibility and the ability to have open source products just is, you know, with big data provides a whole new era in analytics and the ingestion, really the ingestion of big volumes of data. A data management strategy has to incorporate, you know, now has to incorporate that, as well as, you know, sometimes when people hear data management strategy, they think about something like master data management, you know, MDM. And, you know, not everybody has the time to develop that, especially across a huge decentralized organization, you know, where you've got multiple silos of data.
Sure.
So I think basically, you know, that flexibility to be able to bring in a lot of data and not have to analyze a ton of it up front is really the part of the new data management strategy. Is maybe the new strategy is there is no data management, right? So which sounds maybe a little bit chaotic, but it just has to find a way to blend into the more traditional corporate management.
Thanks, Una. I'm sure the rest of the panel would like to comment on that, but I'm conscious of time and I want to give you your opportunity now. So for the next 10 minutes, there will be a roving mic that can go into the audience, And please, you might stand up and give your question to the panel, and if you want to indicate which member of the panel might be most appropriate, that's fine too. So can I take the first question, please? Any question? We have one here, thank you. Willie.
Willie from CSG. I suppose this is really to the infrastructure people. So Barry and Chris. One interesting point, my grandmother, who when she began to use the internet, and when the internet went down because of problems with the operator, she always says Google isn't working. So Chris, that's a good thing for you. So you talked about bandwidth and availability of bandwidth, but one of the real issues is we now have a ubiquitous wireless communication, and how are we going to meet the demand of cloud in a wireless communication environment? So in other words, there's a physical limitation to the bandwidth. So what's the strategy for addressing that?
Yeah. Well, I guess all the softball questions were answered earlier, so now here comes Willie with the really tough ones. The balance is one of, as a carrier and an infrastructure provider, we have to invest in as much business intelligence and understanding of how the network is being utilized than anyone is, right? We need to know at any given time, through our data analytics and our metadata, what are the usage patterns that we're seeing with our customers? Where are the trends going? Anticipating a lot of those trends. I think one of the single most important things that we're doing right now, though, is we announced a suite of applications and services at the Consumer Electronics Show earlier this year that basically are a series of APIs that we're opening up to developers. We're doing that in the spirit of innovation and creativity. We're also doing that to make sure that the applications and services that are being utilized on the network are being utilized in the most efficient way as possible. We have a tool that we actually announced. It's called the Aero tool. And actually, any of you out there that are using mobile apps are welcome to access the AT&T developer site today and look at this. This is a remarkable tool that actually goes through and looks at your bandwidth utilization, looks at your battery consumption that's taking place on the device, and gives you specific recommendations at the code level on how to improve performance for your application and service. So I think that's a specific, tangible example of something that we're doing to try to really foster and encourage people as they're moving from traditional sort of broadband, high-capacity services over to a wireless network, steps that they can take in order to really optimize their application, which in turn optimizes the experience, and quite frankly allows us as a carrier to continue to deliver, cutting-edge services and capabilities.
Thanks, Chris. Barry, do you want to comment?
Yeah, look, I think there's a problem here, right? And it's a business model problem for a lot of the operators in terms of, I think I read that 40% of the internet traffic at 8 p.m. at night in the U.S. is Netflix now. So people streaming videos to their iPads, to wherever they are, right? The problem is as that traffic increases exponentially and demand increases exponentially, the cost curve for the operators is steeper. In other words, it's harder for them to make money the more bandwidth there is. So in the short term, the answer is buy more Cisco access points. But clearly, we need more innovation here. That's why a lot of the operators are moving away from all-you-can-eat plans to ratable plans and so on. That's part of the answer. But we're going to see more Wi-Fi, I think, in lots of public places in the short term as well. But we need innovation here as well, I think. And I predict that what will happen is if the technology providers like Cisco or the operators like AT&T don't move fast enough, Google will do their own thing. And they'll just say, we're going end to end. So it's up to us. We'd also like to see some great research coming out of the universities in Ireland. Willie, I know you guys are doing a lot of good work down there in Waterford.
Just one and other one is, what's the motivation for the operators to do it, the wireless operators? Because they're making so much money now on voice calls and on, low level data. So, how are you going to convince them, A, to move into a new business model where they're not going to get so much? And then maybe for the other people on the audience is, as a company, have you penciled this into your own cloud strategy that if your staff are using wireless, right, and they're using it on a corporate network where you're paying for it. Is that an added cost that you've even thought about?
Well, I'll take the first part of that question, which is, you know, what's the motivation of the operator in order to solve this problem? Because, you know, we do run a business. We're successful today, and you know, we're continuing to make money. But the only reason that we're going to continue to make money is to exceed our customer demands around the services that they want. And the major trend lines that we're tracking to right now are, number one, there's a proliferation of smartphones, and it's not going to stop anytime soon. We're encouraging it. We think it's a great enabler for untapping all the applications and services that are out there. And we have not reached 100% penetration in North America for smartphones. Number two, we're going to start seeing more people carry more than one device. Very common, just looking around the event here today. Not a lot of folks have their laptop with them. Many folks have tablets with them. So the capability of supporting a smartphone, a tablet, and then other devices in the future, looking at what's going on with automotive integration, for example, of access to the network while you're mobile, and you know, the interaction that takes place there, I think we're just going to see more and more. So it's absolutely in the carrier's interest to solve that, both from a customer satisfaction basis, but also to basically articulate and define new revenue segments moving forward.
Thanks, Chris. There's time for one final question. Panch.
My name is Panch Panchanathan. I'm from Arizona State University. I have two sub-part questions. The first question is about reliability. You know, when you start to centralize everything like this into a cloud, one of the worries that people have is about reliability. And the second part of the question is the green data center concept, which is being talked about a lot. And as cloud technology is evolving, how are we being sustainable and more green about it? Any comments on that?
Thanks, Panch. Who would like to take those questions?
I can.
Barry, would you start, please? And
So I think, so first of all, the value proposition of the platform as service providers is that they take care of the application redundancy, the CPU redundancy. You don't have to build any of that in your own data center. Now, obviously, for all that to work, you have to be connected to the cloud provider. So you're into the reliability of the connection now. And again, that varies depending on whether you're wireless or you're on a fixed network and so on. So that's the one drawback there. But it saves you. I mean, Google has redundant data centers. Google has redundant application failover. The application developers can write to that without even having to worry about it. The infrastructure takes care of it. So I think that's kind of part of the platform as a service value proposition. On the green stuff, you know, I think you think about, if you talk to data center people, they talk about megawatts, right? That's how they measure how big their data center is, right? This many megawatts. But by definition, when you centralize things, you can be more efficient. So you can get more virtual machines on blades now, where previously you had separate blades. You can really get the power consumption down. So I think centralization has its advantages. Instead of a separate power brick to every computer, every server, you've got your power management centralized, and there's a lot you can do when it's centralized.
One other comment that I would add, just on top of that, is, you know, if you think about the ways that carriers traditionally had to build out infrastructure and data centers in order to accommodate massive spikes in traffic, one of the best examples I can think of is that my team runs the American Idol, all the back-end capabilities and the product management for the text messaging that occurs on voting for that show. And if you think about historically how we've had to do this, we really had to build out a lot of our messaging infrastructure for the peak, right? We had to make sure that anytime there was a spike, and I guarantee you that during those finals of American Idol, there's always a spike, that we're ready for it and we're able to handle that load. I think one of the advantages that I see with cloud computing overall is, you know, you're not having to build these systems up for spike, you know, peak capacity and then have them sit idle or utilized at 20 or 30% capacity for the rest of the time. And I think that's a huge advantage, not only from a cost basis, but also from a green basis, to be able to utilize the processing power and you know, everything else kind of on an as-needed basis.
Thanks, Chris.
We're going to finish up now this session by really asking each one of our panelists to give a short takeaway message and perhaps even make a prediction for the future around the cloud services, big data space. So while they're gathering their thoughts on that, I'll just use this opportunity to say one thing to you.